Welcome, listeners, to A Writer's Life. I'm your host, Heike Bohm, the author of the novel Secrets in the Shadows. A Writer's Life is a place where I'll be in conversation with fellow writers. We'll discuss all things writing. They'll read from their latest works, and we'll explore what happens beyond the pen in A Writer's Life. It's gonna be a page turner. I just know it. Pull up a chair and join us. I'm recording on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation.
But the main thing that it taught me more than anything was revision.
Yeah.
I mean, revision was the entire part of that experience, and world building, I guess, as well. But revision especially, because I think that's, in my experience as an editor, it's the thing that writers really shy away from when it requires actually turning your novel upside down, which is so often what we need to do in revision. And a lot of writers are not willing to do that. And to be fair, when I was starting out, if somebody had said to me, "Oh, no, you need to..."
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of A Writer's Life. Today, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Michelle Barker, who is an author and editor who lives in Vancouver, BC. Her fiction, nonfiction, and poetry have been published in literary reviews around the world. Her novel, The House of 1,000 Eyes, was named the Kirkus Best Book of 2018 and has won numerous awards, including the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award. Her newest novel, My Long List of Impossible Things, was named a top 10 best bets by the Ontario Library Association. Michelle holds an MFA in creative writing from UBC and works as a senior editor at the Darling Axe. Welcome, Michelle, to A Writer's Life.
Hello, nice to be here.
Thank you for coming on. What were some of your favorite books when you were a child?
Well, the one that I remember the most really is Harriet the Spy. I feel like Harriet the Spy made a huge impact on me. I don't know how well you know it, but the little girl who carries around her notebook and writes everything down, and she's very honest in her notebooks. And then, of course, her notebooks end up, in the wrong hands. And it's very devastating to her, as you can imagine. If you keep a writer's journal and somebody else starts reading it, it's like, no. But I didn't realize it at the time, but I feel like that probably made a big impression on me. It's also a wonderful book. I've read it as an adult as well, and it's really, really good. And my kids love it too. But I think that was probably that's the one that sticks out in my mind the most.
You have lived and traveled in a lot of places. I read that you sailed a boat from Vancouver to Hawaii and back. What was that like?
Well, I actually didn't make it back because I ended up getting pregnant and was very morning sick. And so I had to get off. But the way down was very slow. It took us 29 days to get there, which is extremely slow. Like the Vic Maui race, I think they take 14 days, maybe even less than that. So, but we had a very slow boat. We had, it was me, my husband at the time, my brother, and a friend of his. And it was eventful. I mean, we didn't really know. When I look at it now, I think I can't even believe I did that because we did not really know what we were doing. I mean, honestly, the fact that we made it there, and even worse, I was the navigator. And this was at a time, you have to know me to realize how ridiculous that is. This was at a time when there was not, GPS had just come on the market, but it was so prohibitively expensive that there was no way in the world we could have it. So we had this Loran C system, I think, that I think took us maybe about a quarter of the way. And then the rest of it was done. The rest of it was done by Sexton, and like books and math. Me and Matt, like, honestly, like, this is just such a bad combination. You just don't even know. So I'm in charge of like finding the way. The fact that we got there at all is a minor miracle. But then we had so many mishaps. We got out. There was immediately a storm, which was terrifying. Everybody was seasick except me, actually. I was the only one who wasn't seasick on the way down. And then, of course, on the way home, like, they had to drop me off because I was so seasick. But so everybody is throwing up. The waves are battering us, and we're all like really questioning our life decisions and thinking, like, what are we doing? But anyways, we managed to get through that. And then we hit dead calm, which was also quite terrifying because at a certain point, like you can't just run the engine, you're going to run out of gas, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so we, floated around for quite a while. That's another reason why it took us so long to get there. And then we settled in eventually. It became fun, believe it or not. Although by the end of it, my brother and I weren't talking anymore. So, there was that. But all in all, like I when I look back on it now, I'm really glad I did it. I would never do it again. And when I think it, like if any of my kids said to me, "Oh, we're going to do that," I would say, like, please don't. It's very dangerous. It's not a good idea. But yeah, it was an adventure for sure. Like we saw dolphins, we saw sharks, we saw all sorts of birds that I wouldn't be able to name them, but it was amazing. So yeah, but crazy.
It sounds really exciting and crazy. Would you write about it?
I did
Like,
write
have you
about it.
thought?
No,
Oh,
I
you
did. I did
did.
write about it. Yeah, that was really what launched my career as a writer. I would sail to Hawaii, and I wrote a travel article, which was the first thing that I had ever published in my life. I wrote it for the Vancouver Sun. I took photographs and everything, and they published it, which was super exciting. And then I decided that I would try writing a piece about the whole trip. And I sent it to a big American sailing magazine, never imagining in my life that they would take it, and they did. And
Wow.
the magazine's called Cruising World, and so they published like a bunch of photographs, and it was basically a description of a very bumbling journey across the ocean. And I guess they liked it, and yeah, so that was super exciting for me and very encouraging.
Your first published piece then was about traveling down to Hawaii. How did you find your way into making writing a career?
I was going to, and then I wasn't going to. I really had trouble. No, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't that I had trouble making up my mind. My parents really didn't want me to be a writer. Really, really.
Ah.
They said to me, it's a bad career decision. You're never going to make any money. And I mean, they weren't wrong. Uh, you know, like, let's be real here, right? Yeah, it's not, it's not a great career move. It's true. But first they really wanted me to be a lawyer. So I thought, okay, I guess I'll try that out. And I, I went, I had a summer job at a law firm, worked there as like a researcher sort of slash secretary. I was just doing a bunch of Joe jobs, but it opened my eyes enough to the realization that there was no way in the world I wanted to be a lawyer. Like this was the last thing that I was going to do in my life. So I thought, fine, I was taking a degree in English literature at the time. And I thought I loved it. And I, of course, love books. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll be a professor. So I took an extra year at university because I had taken a course in comparative literature, which I adored. And I thought, this is it. This is for me. So I took an extra year of languages because you needed to be able to speak and read and write 3 languages. I took French and German. French I've kept up. German, unfortunately, I have not. And then I started a master's in comparative literature, and I lasted 1 semester. And I remember this moment so well because I was in the graduate reading room. I was doing a paper on Ibsen, a playwright that I love. And I was, thinking about his work and whatever. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to take this apart. I want to learn how to write like this guy. Like, this is amazing. So I thought, fine, I'm going to finish the term out, which I did. And I quit right away. My parents were devastated. They were very upset with me. And luckily for me, there was a job being advertised right then. A woman in Vancouver who was looking for an editor and researcher. She was writing this nonfiction book about Canadian women in power. And I thought, wow, like this is the job for me. This is exactly what I want. This is going to sort of show me, what it's like to be a writer, and I can, get my feet wet and whatever. So I contacted her. I got the job. We worked together for, I think, probably 2 years. And it was great. I mean, I really, she had her office in her home, and I would go there every day, and she'd be working on her computer and getting me to, look things up. And I was, reworking her prose and whatever. And it was just such a great experience. And she ended up publishing the book, which was wonderful. And I walked away with a real, love for what I was doing, and a realization that this was where I wanted to be. This was my job. This was what I wanted to do. So yeah, it was very lucky that job popped up just right at that time.
So did you always know you wanted to be a writer, or that's how you fell into it?
No, I really did know. From the time I was I think for sure from the time I was in high school, but I had been writing. I'd kept a journal basically my whole life, and books were my favorite thing. I was always reading, always surrounded by books. And I think by the time I was in high school, I remember because I had a good friend and we sort of made a pact. This is so weird to even think about this now, but we'd made this pact, and he wanted to write. He said, I'm going to be a writer. I want to write like John Steinbeck. And I said, yeah, I want to be a writer too. And I think I said I wanted to write like Sidney Sheldon or something. I don't know, some like dime paperback, like just sort of schlock writer. That was my aspiration. But anyways, I wanted to be a writer. So even from then, and I was writing in high school, I was writing plays, actually. I don't really know why I was led to drama at that time. I think because I had a teacher, he was a psychology teacher, in fact, but he also wrote. And he wrote a play, and I was super inspired by him. He was my favorite teacher of all time. And I thought, oh, if he wrote a play, I'm going to write a play. So that's sort of how I started off. I had placed in a contest or something. And so that was encouraging. And that sort of, got the ball rolling.
It was funny when you're talking about the schlock writing. I not that when I started writing my book, I thought, oh, how can I make a living at writing? And I thought, I know, I'll write Harlequin romances because I think they get paid a lot. So I started writing, and I'm not a big romantic person at all. And so I started writing, and within the first 3 paragraphs, I had killed off all my characters.
Oh no. Harlequin would throw you out on your ear for that.
I thought, oh yeah, I don't think I can do this.
No, I know. No, Harlequin, like as a career move, it's great.
Yeah.
If you can do it.
Yes.
But I mean, no, I like, because I'd heard that as well. Like you can write these, you write them really quickly, they sell, everybody loves them. And I thought, no, everybody is suited. Every writer, I think, is suited for a particular type of writing. I mean, sometimes more than one type, I think. But there are certain types of writing that I know for sure I am not suited for. And I would have done the same as you. I would have killed off all my characters.
Yeah. 1 paragraph, Harlequin romance.
Yeah.
They're all dead. What was your first book that you had published?
Well, technically, I guess it was a chapbook of poetry, but I mean, they're so thin and small that I don't really count that. So my first novel was a fantasy for teens called The Beggar King. And it was a long, long time in the making. I had written 2 novels before that, neither of which went anywhere. I actually had an agent, but she was new in the business. And I feel like anybody who knocked on her door, she was like, yes, come, I'll take you on. So I got my agent right away. It was super easy because she didn't know anybody. So she took these novels. Of course, they didn't sell. They were terrible. I mean, I sort of wrote them. I think I did a couple of drafts on them and thought, oh yeah, they're ready to go. Sent them off. And I mean, no, they were awful. But I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. And I suppose she didn't either. So I'm just thankful now that nothing came of them and nobody has ever seen them. And that's just fine with me. That's the way it's going to stay. So then I wrote this. I started working. I don't know. I was reading C.S. Lewis. That's what happened. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, and I hadn't really read much fantasy in my life. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, this guy is creating a whole world out of his head. Like, this is super fun. This is what I'm going to do. Like, duh. That's what fantasy is. But I mean, I didn't know that. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to write fantasy. Never having written fantasy, having read very little of it, not knowing at all what I was doing. So, and there's a huge learning curve when it comes to writing fantasy. It is not like regular stuff. Like just world building in and of itself is a very big thing. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I thought, oh, this is fun. I'm just going to make this all up. I'm not going to have to do any research. That's also a bonus, right? And I sat down, wrote a draft in 6 weeks. And literally it took me 10 years to get it to a publisher after that. That's how long. I mean, there were a lot of different aspects to it. First of all, the agent she didn't represent fantasy. So she actually gave me to somebody else who did, and they wanted it, but then they wanted me to rewrite it and rewrite it again and again. So I rewrote it like several different times. Finally, the agent said, you know what, we can't sell it. We're giving up on you. So I thought, okay, that's nice. Thank you. And I thought, that's fine. I'll either find another agent or I'm going to do this myself. And so I worked on it again. And by this point, the novel did not look anything like that first 6-week draft. It was completely different, but it was still not where it needed to be. And in fact, at one point, Annick Press, your publisher, accepted it for publication. And so this was huge. And by then I had already been working on it and sending it out and rewriting it for 7 years or something like that, or 8 years.
Yeah.
So of course, everybody who I knew that I'd been working on this novel. So I told them all, I got a publisher. This is awesome. I tell everybody, this is so big news. Everybody's super excited. 2 weeks later, they contact me and they say, you know what? We've changed our mind. This is there's just too much that needs to be changed. We don't know, what it's going to look like. But the publisher gave me this 2-page letter of feedback, which was absolutely invaluable. It was just the best thing, because and he was completely right. All the things that he suggested, there was too much business. It was too complicated, too convoluted. You have to do this, that, and the other thing. So at first I was fuming, because A, I had to tell everybody I knew that actually, no, I don't have a publisher anymore. And B, it meant rewriting the whole novel again. But after I calmed down and I, sort of absorbed the feedback, I realized that this guy was right on the money. Mm-hmm. And so I just sat down and I rewrote the whole thing basically the way he told me to. And, looked around for a while longer and then did find a publisher eventually. So all in all, it was a great experience for a lot of reasons. But the main thing that it taught me more than anything was revision.
Yeah.
I mean, revision was the entire part of that experience, and world building, I guess, as well. But revision especially, because I think that's, in my experience as an editor, it's the thing that writers really shy away from when it requires actually turning your novel upside down, which is so often what we need to do in revision. And a lot of writers are not willing to do that. And to be fair, when I was starting out, if somebody had said to me, oh, no, you need to start again and you need to do this whole thing from scratch, I would have said, what? No, what are you talking about? I've already written it once.
You started off, you wrote fantasy. Well, first you wrote poetry. Talk about that a little bit, and then I'll get back to my question.
I know, right? It makes no sense, doesn't it? Well, poetry is an interesting thing too, because I spent most of my life as a poetry hater. I was not, no, that's not an exaggeration. I did not like poetry at all. I mean, you know what you learn in high school, right? High school poetry is just, the thing that they're doing is they're basically turning all students away from poetry. Poetry is it's like a punishment. And that's so not what poetry is, So that was all the poetry I had. And I actively, I went through a whole English literature degree without ever taking any poetry, which I was pretty proud of, to be honest. And finally, I joined a writers group. I lived in Quebec for a while, and I joined this amazing writers group, and I still actively hating poetry. But there were a couple of poets in the group, and they would write, because what we would do is somebody would be the organizer basically, and they would give us prompts, and we'd have 15 or 20 minutes to do whatever we wanted with that prompt, and you could write anything. And there were a couple of people who were always writing poetry, and they would read these poems out, and they were not what I had expected from poetry. I mean, they were lovely and deep and beautiful and profound, and I thought, oh, okay, that's not what I thought poetry was. But at one point I wrote something and read it out loud, and somebody said to me, oh, that sounds like a poem. And I laughed and I said, oh, of course it's not a poem. I'm not a poet. I don't write poetry, And then one of the women took me aside and said, if you've never heard of Billy Collins or Mary Oliver, I can lend you a couple of their books and you can read them and, see what poetry is really like. And I did. And of course, I had to eat all my words because it was fantastic. And I just had no experience of poetry like that. And so all of a sudden I thought, wow, I actually really like this. And this is a great way to write. And so I started writing poetry, and I wrote a lot of it. Actually, I at one point did an experiment where I tried to write a poem a day for an entire year.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't quite make it. I didn't get 365, but I got about 340. Wow. And a lot of them were very bad. Let's be real. But it turned into a rhythm, because basically in a month I would have a bunch of bad poems, a bunch of mediocre poems, and then one or two really, really good ones. I came to realize that I wouldn't get the really, really good ones without the really bad ones. So it was an interesting experiment in terms of, what you have to do in order to create something good. You have to create a lot of bad stuff in order to get the good stuff. So in that way, it was eye-opening and fun, and also a great experiment in terms of paying attention, which I think is something that all writers, whether you're writing poetry or anything really, you have to pay attention to what's going on in your world. And And that's what it forced me to do, because every day I wanted to have a poem at the end of the day. And sometimes, it'd be 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I still hadn't written my poem. And I had to start looking around for something to write about. And it forced you to see ideas everywhere. And that was very useful. Yeah, I've written a lot of poetry. Lately I have not written as much, but I've been thinking, because I've been helping a friend who's working on some poetry right now, and it's sort of rekindled that passion. And I was thinking, because I've been working on 2 novels right now, and I thought, when they're done, maybe I'm going to take a little break from novel writing and go back to poetry for just a little bit. I might do that. I've been thinking about that.
By doing a poem a day, did that also teach you a healthy writing practice?
Well, I already had that, to be honest, because I write every day anyways. Really, it showed me the value of a deadline. Deadlines for me are essential. Like, if I don't have a day where it's like, by this day, you've got to have this draft done, I waffle around, like for example, this is a good example. I'm writing a novel right now, and there was this key scene. It was like one of the central scenes in the novel. And I had worked my way up to that, because I write linearly always. And I'd worked my way to that point, and I thought, oh no, I've got to write this scene. And the scene is important. The whole book pivots on it. So there's lots of pressure. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I have this online group that I belong to. And we post our work every week. And, each week it's somebody else's turn. And I saw that my turn was coming up. And I thought, okay, I have to have something by this day. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care what it looks like. By this day, that scene has got to be written, because I've got to post it for the group. And lo and behold, I sat down and did it. And of course, now it's done. And I without the deadline, I don't think I would have done it. I would have just kept on sort of, drifting around, trying to not do it. And so I think that the poem a day really showed me that I need these drop dead dates in order to get anything done. It's really helpful for me. So in terms of practice, it's not that I don't write every day, because I do, but I don't necessarily accomplish what I need to without those deadlines. So that's what was so valuable for me.
Nice. I get it. On my novel that I'm working on right now, I'm in this part and I'm just stuck. I've never really been stuck in writing a scene. And, she goes to the office, head person is going to talk to the protagonist. And I'm like, yeah, but why is she there? What's she going to talk to her about? And I know it has to be this scene. And so I was up all last night trying to think, what is it? What is she saying? What is she saying? And so I'm going to take your advice and just have a deadline around it.
Yeah, I honestly give yourself a deadline and promise yourself that you're going to stick to it. And, I think one thing that also does, and this is another thing that I learned from the poetry, the poem a day thing, is that it's not so important that your work is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it's done, especially if it's a first draft. The whole idea behind a first draft is to do it, to get it finished, right? It's not going to be pretty. First drafts, that's not what first drafts are meant for. It's just getting it on the page. And when your only goal is to get it on the page, you'll get it done, because it takes, we had a great novel writing teacher in the MFA program named Gail Anderson Dargatz, who's also a wonderful novelist. And her motto for our class was to write crap. And the point being is that when you take that pressure off of yourself to write, this beautiful prose, and all you need to do is write 1,000 words. It doesn't matter if there are 1,000 beautiful words. They just need to be 1,000 words. All of a sudden you're writing, and more often than not, it turns out to be a lot better than you expected, which was in fact the experience I had this morning when I reread this scene, which I had, worked on yesterday, just thinking, oh, this is crap. This is awful. I don't even know, but I just have to get it done. And I sat down and reread it this morning and thought, oh, it's actually not that bad. So, and usually that's the experience that people have, is that they think that, I'm just going to, whatever, I'm just going to put it on the page. I don't even care. And it turns out to be better than you expected. So I find that taking that pressure off of yourself is also a very valuable thing to do.
Yeah, it's true. I did an exercise where I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And I thought, it doesn't matter what's in here. But what I was able to do was pull 1 or 2 sentences out of all of that and build this whole other aspect scene that I never would have thought would transpire.
Yes, exactly. And that's, again, the same thing, is that you don't get those good sentences without the bad ones.
Exactly.
which is, what I learned from that poetry experience. And that's often, in the writing group that we had in Quebec, that was also what we would do is we would have these prompts, right? And the idea was to keep your pen moving on the page, Natalie Goldberg's thing, for 15 or 20 minutes. It didn't matter what you were writing. It didn't matter whether it was good or bad, just write. And more often than not, when we'd read our stuff out loud, there would be these gems in there that you would never have gotten to if you hadn't done the work. So, again, it's just getting the pen moving on the page, and something good will come from it.
So you started off with fantasy, but then you shifted your writing to historical fiction.
Yeah,
Why?
sounds weird, right? Yeah, that's also an interesting story. They're not as far off as you think. Both historical fiction and fantasy really rely on world building and setting. If you can world build in fantasy, you can write historical fiction because it is more or less the same thing, right? You're building a world, except you have to do the dreaded, for me, research that I've been trying so hard to avoid. It looks like I didn't avoid it after all. But in the end, that's really what you're doing is you're building this world that is unfamiliar probably to most of your readers, and you have to try to build it in such a way that you're adding in seamless details. You're not dumping all this information on the reader's head, and you're creating a story with this persuasive backdrop. So in terms of craft, the jump from fantasy to historical fiction was really not all that big. But the reason why I did it was because I had been in the MFA program, and I was writing. I was taking a class with Maggie DeVries and writing for children and young adults. And so she gave us this assignment at one point that was we were supposed to choose a period of time in history, and we were supposed to write a short piece, whether it was, for young children, young adults, didn't matter. Just write something from, based in history. So I'd grown up, of course, my mother is German, and I'd grown up with her telling me stories from the time I was little. And so I thought, well, of course, I may as well just choose one of those stories and write something about it. So that was what I did. And it ended up being, better than I expected, I guess. And, Maggie had said, you could actually make a picture book with this. And so I did that. And to my huge surprise, I sold it. And it was nominated for a big award and everything. It was very exciting. And they got this illustrator, Renee Benoit, who just did a lovely job on the book. And it was all about my mom's life. And so, of course, when it came out, my mom was super excited. We had a launch. All the relatives came. We had the pictures up on the, we had like real pictures from my mom's life, and then the artwork that Renee Benoit had done. And it was a really wonderful experience. But the thing that it made me realize was that my mom was getting older. And if I didn't start work, because I'd always thought about writing something about her life and about the time that she lived through, because she was a child during Nazi Germany. And then she ended up in East Germany after that. So she has a lot of very interesting stories in her life. And I thought, I'm going to miss them. Because there was lots that I hadn't talked to her about, and there was lots that had lots of questions. And I thought, if I don't, shift gears and start working on this stuff with my mom, I'm not going to have my chance. And so I basically dropped. I was in the middle of writing a different novel altogether, and I just dropped everything I was doing and started working on what ended up becoming my long list of impossible things. But that is not the way it started. It started as a huge mess, to be quite honest. So that's a whole other story.
That's interesting. My mom, she also grew up in Nazi Germany and also ended up in East Germany.
Oh, wow.
And so like you, I keep recording my mom's stories. And my goal is to turn her life and her stories into a graphic novel. So I'm
graphic novel. Amazing.
Yeah. So I'm slowly working my way through that, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my intention not graphic novel, but a novel. That was my intention in the beginning. I was going to do a novel about my mom's life. That was my goal. So I did. I wrote this novel. It was like 114,000 words long. It was this big pile of pages. And I had this sense that something was not quite working with it. So I set it aside. I gave it to a couple of other people, including an agent. And she also, she loved it, but she said, there's really useful feedback. There's something off. okay, like, can you elaborate maybe? But she couldn't put her finger on it. And so I thought, fine, I'm just going to set it aside. I'm going to do something else, which was when I wrote The House of 1,000 Eyes. And then I came back to it was not called My Long List at the time. It was, I don't remember what it was called. Prisoners of War. That's what it was called. Came back to it, sat down and read it and thought, oh no, this is just not working. It just, and by that point I'd given it to somebody who did put their finger on what the problem was. And the problem was that it was the story of a journey, but the protagonist never really had a goal. The whole story was about the journey, and it just wasn't carrying its weight. And I thought, wow, you know what? This big pile of pages is going to have to go in the garbage, and I'm going to have to start again. And I realized that I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it as my mom's life. It just wasn't, it was too vague. It was not focused enough. It just wasn't working for me. And then of course there was the danger of upsetting all my relatives, which I was inevitably going to do. Yeah. So I thought, no, I better not. I better step away from this. And I took some of the characters. I mean, I kept some of the main characters and completely fictionalized it. Just the whole, aside from a very small part at the beginning of the novel where they're kicked out of their home by the Soviet soldiers, which actually did happen to my mom. Other than that, the rest of it is absolutely fiction. It's not based on my mom's life at all. And so the moment but of course, using all like a bunch of things that my mom had told me, like she told me some great details of what life was like back then. And I incorporated all of those. But in terms of what happens to the characters, as soon as I decided I can make it up, I don't have to follow the things that happened to my mom. It just was so freeing. It opened up so many other possibilities. And it also lifted this very big worry that I had that I was going to really piss her off. So I didn't want to do that. So that way it was like, you know what, Mom, don't worry. I made it all up. It has nothing to do with you. So, and she loved it in the end. So, you know, she read it and she thought it was great. So
nice.
That was a relief. Yeah.
Your latest book, My Long List of Impossible Things, is set in post-war Germany. And you did say that parts of it were inspired by your mom. Mm-hmm. Would you read an excerpt from My Long List of Impossible Things for us?
Yes. In fact, I will read two. And the first one that I'm going to read is part of what actually did happen to my mom. So the second one is not, though. But yes, let me... So I'll tell you just a little bit about it. It said just as World War II is coming to an end, and the main character, whose name is Katja, she's 16. She has an older sister who's very sarcastic and was very fun to write, and their mother. And they're kicked out of their home when the Soviet soldiers arrive, and they have to go and stay with some friends who live in a town quite far away. And the friends, of course, don't know that they're coming. And, you know, the roads are dangerous and there's, all sorts of violence happening. And basically it's a story of survival, really. But also Katja, the main character, she had dreams of being a concert pianist. And of course, one of the things she had to leave behind was her piano, which was devastating to her. And so, you know, music has a huge role in the story. But mainly it's this character who is, you know, coming to terms with what's happened to her country. Her piano teacher was Jewish and she didn't really know what was going on with the Holocaust. And, all of this stuff is coming to light now. She has to come to terms with this. And she also, as a teenager, makes some pretty bad decisions in her life. And so, you know, she has to deal with the fallout from that. So that's what the book is about. So the first excerpt that I'm going to read is right near the beginning when the Soviet soldiers have arrived and they're kicking them out. The door burst open again. Out, said a soldier. He tapped the gold lady's watch on his arm and held up 10 fingers. Then he left. What does he mean, out? I said. But Mutti was already on her way to the kitchen. We have 10 minutes. Take only what you can carry and only the important things. Clothes, food, nothing frivolous. Hurry. But why are they making us leave? I said. They have guns, Mutti said. They don't need a reason. I felt dizzy. Out and out. We can't walk away and leave everything behind. I'd never lived anywhere except in this house. I knew all its bumps and corners by heart. Hilda glanced at Mutti. We'll be back soon, right? It's only temporary, Mutti said. Outside our window, people passed with their horses and wagons. The women riding with the children, the men walking alongside, waving long sticks to keep the horses moving. Only temporary? Their wagons were so stuffed it was a wonder they didn't topple over. Mutti rushed around gathering food. I was surprised to see she already had a bag packed with photographs and clothes, things she must have prepared in advance. Where will we go? I asked. I'm sure Aunt Ilse and Uncle Otto will take us in until this blows over, she said, like a storm, or the smell from the fields when the manure had been spread. She handed us each a bowl and cup, a fork, a shawl. She wrapped up the bread she'd made that morning and packed all the salami. I ran to the piano and grabbed my book of Beethoven sonatas and the book of Schumann's Lieder Herr Goldstein had entrusted to me before he'd gone away. You'll take care of it for me, he'd said. No, Katja, they're too heavy, Mutti said. You'll have to choose one. My heart argued with me back and forth. It was like choosing which kitten to save. Hilda stood there with her hands on her hips. What will you do with piano music, but no piano? She always said she was the one God had given all the common sense to. No piano. I had stepped away from it so easily that morning. You never knew when something would happen for the last time. If you did, you'd cling to every precious second. I stuffed Herr Goldstein's book into a bag and then eyed the piano, the most immovable instrument of all time, as if there were some way of bringing it. How did you fit a lifetime onto your back? You folded it until your life was so small it took up almost no space. Out of impulse, I snatched the doily from on top of the piano and stuffed it into my pocket. I went to the bedroom Hilda and I shared, put on my second dress and my sweater, and packed socks, underclothes, and a blanket. Then I put on my coat. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Hilda pack a hairbrush and the pictures of fancy city clothes she'd cut out of catalogs and pinned onto our bedroom walls. Mutti stood waiting for us at the side door. She fastened a bucket to my rucksack, stuffed our pockets with food, and said, "We have to go." None of us wanted to take that first step out the door. Hold your head up, Mutti said, leading the way. We'll leave with dignity, if nothing else. So the second reading that I'll do is it's just a few pages on, actually, and they're on the road now, going to see Ilse and Otto. After 3 more days of walking, I couldn't help but ask, how much farther? Where do Aunt Ilse and Uncle Otto live again? Pfahlhof, Mutti said. She'd brought a letter with the address on it. It might as well have been China or the moon. It was farther than I wanted to walk. My feet knew it. Even my shoes were ready to give up. I think it's silly to go all the way to Pfahlhof, I said. Why can't we stay somewhere closer? Luckily, no one has asked for your opinion, Mutti said, so you will please keep it tucked in your pocket where it won't do any harm. Fine. I didn't want to think about Pfahlhof, some German city in the middle of who knew where. I knew where, a place I didn't want to go. Or Aunt Ilse, who anyway wasn't even our aunt and didn't know we were coming. Guess how happy she'd be to see us. 3 more mouths to feed, and who are you again? Distant relatives, which didn't count for much when there was no food anywhere, and millions of people were wandering the countryside with nowhere to go. All the Aunt Ilses in the world must have cringed every time there was a knock at their door. Ilse will be relieved to know we're alive, Mutti said. She and I were very close when we were youngsters. We used to play piggy on the ladder together in the hayloft. Mutti, with her no-nonsense bun, her lips pursed, scrubbing milk churns or covered in flour. I couldn't imagine her as a little girl playing a game with string. She had talked to us often about Ilse, because Ilse and her husband owned a clothing shop. I was curious to meet someone whose idea of dressing up meant more than taking off her apron. Hilda wasn't just curious, she was thrilled. Will Aunt Ilse have Paris fashions? Will she let us borrow them, do you think? Stop making that face, I said. They're only clothes. I worried we wouldn't be fancy enough for Ilse, but that was a problem for tomorrow, Katja. Today, Katja had other things on her mind. You know what I really want, I said. Here we go, said Hilda. I want a wristwatch. I'd seen them on Soviet soldiers, their serious field uniforms with the fancy shoulder boards, their caps with the Red Star emblem, the rifles and tall black boots, and 5 ladies' wristwatches lined all the way up one arm. You need a wristwatch like a toad needs a waistcoat, Mutti said. A farmer works by the sun. When it rises, you get out of bed. End of story. A wristwatch is pure silliness. That's why I want one. something dainty, so I could turn my arm and pretend to check the time while admiring the way it looked on my wrist. A farmer didn't wear a watch, but a concert pianist did. Perhaps a pocket watch with a long gold chain disappearing into my pocket like a secret. It would tick against my chest like a second heartbeat. Not just 1, 2, 3 wristwatches, I said. I'd wear them all at once. I'd set one on Berlin time, one for London, and one for New York City. Dummkopf. Hilda's cheeks went red. We don't need to know the time anymore. What time is it? Over. It's after. It's never. You don't need a wristwatch to tell you that. Just look around.
Fabulous. Well done.
Thank you.
What sort of research did you do for this novel?
Oh my goodness. I did so much. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Until you start reading. Oh my God. I read so many books. I really, really did not know a lot about World War II, post-war, all of that. And then I ended up actually hiring a PhD student who specialized in Soviet history. As I think her specialty was just as World War II was coming to an end, which of course was right up my alley.
Right.
And again, I thought I'd gotten it mostly right, and she found all sorts of things that needed to be finessed or changed or just taken out altogether. So it was money well spent. But yeah, no, I had to do a lot of work.
I did the same thing. I hired some war historians to afterwards, once I've written the novel, to vet it, because that was so important to make sure that it was correct.
Oh, the last thing you want is to have somebody who really knows the history to read it and say, wow, you really didn't do your homework, or just to get something outright wrong. I was so conscious of that. And the thing is, it's so easy to make these mistakes because we didn't live at that time. And, you take for granted. Like, I think at one point I'd mentioned something about toast, and I mentioned it to my mom, and she said, toast? She said, she said, where I was living, there was no toast. What do you even talk? Like, toast was not a thing. And it was like, how would you even know that toast wasn't a thing?
Yeah.
So it was those little moments that it was so easy to get wrong. And I was always conscious. I think there was, I'm trying to remember about electric light. If my family had electric light on the farm, I don't even remember now. But it was little things like that. Reaching for a light switch and thinking, oh no, they wouldn't have done that. Not at that house. So I had to think about every moment.
You are the senior editor at the Darling Axe. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's been just such a great opportunity. I feel so lucky to be working there. That company was started by David Brown just a few years ago, and he and I had been in the MFA program together. We'd taken a couple of classes together, and we stayed in touch afterwards, and we'd been reading each other's work. And so he knew what my work was like as an editor. And he decided he'd been working for another editorial company, and he decided he wanted to start off on his own. And so he contacted me and asked me if I was interested. And I was at a point in my life where I was just getting divorced, realizing that, I was going to have a better source of income than what I had. And so it was just timely in every possible way. And so I said, yeah, absolutely. I would love to do this. I'd been editing for many, many years, but, privately, but never in a really serious and formal way. And so it was such a great opportunity. And the company has grown. It started off with just the two of us. We now have a team of 14 editors. And especially with the pandemic, more work than we can handle. It's just everybody wants to write a novel, so which has been great. But the thing that I really like, because I really like working one-on-one with writers. To me, it's a great opportunity, and it feels sort of like it's like a mini MFA. That's how I try to think of my feedback. I want to teach as much as anything. I also learn from every single manuscript that I edit. It never fails that I will be working on something and seeing how this manuscript is going wrong, and then flipping over to my work and thinking, I'm doing the exact same thing here. So, and that happens all the time. But it's so great. And then of course, also, like, I don't know everything about writing. So I have to look things up. I have to consult with colleagues. There's all sorts of, times where I'm unsure about, is this the way point of view should work in this case? And so I'm always learning. And the whole process of editing other people's work is basically forcing me to raise my game. And so it's been a great process in every possible way. I've really, really been lucky with that.
What advice do you have for anyone writing and their editing?
Oh, I have lots of advice. First of all, one of the most valuable things that you can do is to set your work aside. I mean, I didn't realize what was wrong with my long list of impossible things until I set it aside for quite a long time. You can't just set it aside for a week or two. That's not long enough. You have to set it aside until you have basically forgotten what you've written, because at that point you also sever your emotional connection to the work. And then when you go back and look at it, you're looking at it objectively, and you're looking at it with a willingness to do whatever needs to be done in order to fix it. And you'll see a lot of mistakes too that we can't see our mistakes when we're really close to our work. At least I certainly can't. And also, even if someone says to me, oh, that scene's not working, you have to get rid of it, I'm like, I love that scene. I just wrote that scene. That scene is perfect. I'm not taking it out. Whereas 6 months from now, you put the book in front of me and I'll look at that scene. I'll think, oh, that's got to go. And there's no connection to it. And so in that way, you're willing to do the hard work that you're not willing to do when you're so close to the writing. So setting it aside is one way of dealing with that. The other thing I do that I think is really valuable is reading your work out loud. I read all of my novels out loud, and that may sound very long and tedious, which it sometimes is, but it is the most valuable thing you can do in terms of hearing your own mistakes. Because I think that when we read in our head, our eyes skip over things. We don't realize we're being boring, for example. You don't realize how boring you are until you have to read it out loud. That's on. I mean, and also you don't realize when you're not making sense. Yeah. Until you have to read it out loud, because I'll be reading a chapter and I'll think, what? Why is he doing this? Like, why would he go there? This makes absolutely no sense. So out comes the pen and I'm, crossing it off or whatever. But also, I'll be reading, paragraph after paragraph of description of a room or something. And I'll think, oh man, I'm bored, and if I'm bored, the reader is, going to be throwing the book across the room. And, but you miss these things if you're just reading it in your head. So reading it out loud, even though it sounds like a very long job, it is absolutely worthwhile. You will see what's wrong with your work. So those are the two things that I highly recommend. And of course, getting feedback from other people. I would not, I mean, a novel, of course, is a solitary job, but if you don't call in help from other people, I think you're really missing out, because we all need feedback. If you can find somebody who you trust, somebody who's going to tell you the truth, and somebody who knows something about the craft of writing. So it's not just like, first of all, not your mom. Unless it happens to be me, criticizing my kids' work, which they don't write, so I don't do that. But I mean, if you don't have somebody who really understands the craft of writing and is willing to tell you the truth about what's going on, it's not going to be very, very valuable. You need good feedback. So I have a couple of people who I call in at different stages of my writing. I have my first person who really sort of goes at the plot and says, no, this isn't going to fly, or this doesn't make sense, or whatever. Then I have the next person who is very much more of an emotional reader. And so she'll look at it and she'll say, well, how come your character is not reacting here? And why aren't they getting more upset about this? And so I get all of that from her. And then I have a final reader who has this vision of story that I have never seen in anybody else. And when I give her the work, she basically, comes back and says, okay, well, like, the story's taken a wrong turn here and the arc is not complete. And, the character, I don't feel, that the character would behave in this way. And it was, so anyways, the three of them together are just the greatest feedback that I could hope for. And I don't know what I would do without them. There's no way in the world I would send a novel to anybody without them having read it. And in fact, I have to say this, one of the novels I'm working on right now that I am rewriting, I am probably rewriting because I did not send it to my third person because I was in a rush. I thought I'm going to give it to my first two people who were awesome, missed the third person because she was very busy. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to wait for her. It's great the way it is. I'm just going to send it to the publisher. Guess what? It wasn't great the way it was. So here I am rewriting it. And this time I am for sure going to give it to her before the publisher sees it, because clearly I need her.
So what are you working on now?
Oh, I've got two things on the go. As I said, I've got another novel that's set in Germany. And this was actually the publisher's idea. He said, why not set a novel at the time before the Nazis came to power, when people didn't really know what was going to happen, which has been an interesting challenge because, when you, as you know, from writing historical fiction, we are approaching this with hindsight. So we know how this turns out, but you have to try to put yourself into these characters' shoes who did not really see the Nazis coming. Like they were around, of course, and they were, very slowly gathering power, but they were not a sure thing in 1929, not by any means. And so it's a very interesting perspective, and it's a sort of a form of mental gymnastics to sort of put yourself back there and think, okay, we don't know what's coming. We don't know how this is going to turn out. So try to imagine putting yourself in that place of not knowing. So that's one of the novels that I'm working on. The other novel is something that I've sort of it was an idea that I had a number of years ago, wasn't ready to write it yet. And then about a year ago, I thought, no, I'm ready now. I'm going to do it. And so it's called The Ministry of Sleep. And it's a novel that's set in the future, about 100 years in the future, in Canada, after, environmental catastrophe and all sorts of diseases have ravaged the world. It sounds like a little like what we're living through right now. And yes, I did write it during the pandemic. And it's basically, the world is dealing with all these issues of overpopulation and limited resources and all of that. And so what governments came together and decided that they would implement this sleep program. So basically, when you turn 25, you have to sleep for 6 months of the year. And so every, big city has got these underground pods and you have a sensor in your neck. You can't cheat the system. The sensor rings and you have to go down for your 6 months of sleep. So my main character is a surgeon, and she wakes up from her 6 months of sleep only to discover all sorts of stuff has happened in her absence. And she doesn't really know what's going on. And the one person who can tell her, she's going to meet him, and then he's murdered. And now she has to figure out what's going on. So, and also the murder, it looks like they're framing her because it happens in her apartment. So, she's got a lot of stuff she's dealing with. So that's been super fun. I have really, really enjoyed working on that, and it's almost finished. So, and my daughter is a doctor, so she was able to help me a little bit. And a very close friend is a surgeon, and so she also helped me. And the book is also about addiction. It's got lots of stuff going on. So I'm just wrapping it up and handing it over to my agent, like within about a week or so. So hopefully she likes it. We'll see. But yeah.
I can't wait to read that.
Yeah. Well, I love it, but again, obviously I've been wrong in the past. So we'll see what the agent says before I say anything else about it.
One more question. How did you go about getting an agent?
Yeah, I was trying to remember how she and I connected, because we connected through an editor, I think. I think that must have been how it was. And I had given her a couple of my Germany books, which she passed on, actually. And then we kept crossing paths somehow, and we kind of became friends. In fact, even though she wasn't representing me, and when I was going through this divorce, I was having issues, professional issues as well, and so I talked to her about getting advice, and she gave me some very good advice. And then finally, I guess I brought her my long list of impossible things, and she was interested in representing it, and it sort of went from there. And then she came with me to the award ceremony for the Amy Mathers Award, which was really nice. And so she's sort of been around since then. And I think we connected through an editor. So not the usual way that you get an agent, but again, lucky, so, and she's lovely. I really like her.
Any final words you want to say?
I guess maybe if anybody who is writing and struggling and hasn't gotten published yet, because that it's a long road, you have to really be persistent. You have to be willing to hear no a lot before you're going to start hearing yes. And you have to be willing to, take some hard criticism on your work and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. I think that's the thing I've learned through all these years is to keep rewriting and to not give up, and I think that if you can do those two things, that you'll eventually get there, but prepare for the long road because it's not easy.
Michelle, thank you for coming on A Writer's Life. It was a blast listening to you and being in conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was awesome to talk to you and nice to see you again and hear your voice. And I'm looking forward to reading your next book.
Likewise.
Thanks.
For more information on Michelle Barker, please check the links below. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to A Writer's Life? And if you want more information about myself and my novel Secrets in the Shadows, visit my website at www.heigebohm.ca. For a kinder world, take care of each other.
Which was,
yes,
actually very flattering, right?
Yeah.
But this is better. So.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Are you using any kind of lighting behind your computer?
I have lighting behind.